As advised yesterday, the rotation is 2 government, 2 opposition, 1 Green, 1 JLN, 2 for any other member, but I will prioritise an independent member under those rules. So, government members. First constituency question, Mr Barakas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My constituent question is to the Minister for Health, Mental Health and Wellbeing. One of my constituents, 83-year-old Bert from Moona, has raised with me his concerns that lifts in the Royal Hobart Hospital do not have any handrails, which causes some difficulty for the elderly and those with disability who attend the hospital. Minister, would the Royal Hobart Hospital consider ensuring handrails are installed in the lifts?
Rather than letting the Minister answer, we'll call on the next Liberal constituency question. Mr Wood from Bass.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Business, Industry and Resources. Myself and many Tasmanians enjoy the annual trout fishing weekend up at the Great Lake, and with much regret that it was cancelled this year. My question is, can we look forward to one next year?
Excellent. Ms Finlay for Bass.
Madam Speaker, my constituent question is to the Premier. Premier, Greg from Dorset would like to know why the Board of Inquiry report into the Dorset Council hasn't been released, despite the government having it for the last fortnight and previously promising to release it in the next 7 days.
The second constituency question from Labor, please.
Greg from Dorset.
Greg, I'm sure that Greg from Dorset is watching with great interest right now. And also his anonymity is protected in the House. Is there a second constituency question?
Correct, Madam Speaker.
From you, Ms Finlay. You've done well.
My question this morning is also to the Premier. Premier, some of my constituents in Beauty Point are extremely concerned by the legislative uncertainty around the arrangements for operators and residents in caravan parks across Tasmania. Will you commit to introducing legislation as a matter of urgency to clarify the relationships between park owners, long-term residents, especially those who own their dwellings, local councils, state government, especially in relation to planning matters?
Thank you. Constituency question from the Greens, Mr Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Parks and Environment and comes from disability advocate Kate Kelly. The 2021 maintenance report into the Salamanca Arts Centre lift was tabled last night and it raises significant questions. 3 years ago, the report outlined the need for urgent repairs to make the lift safe for use and to avoid eventual failure, given the evidence of ongoing water ingress. As the lift remained operational for public use for almost 3 years, the report was done in early 2021 and the lift failed in November 2023. My question is, were any of the safety repairs outlined in the report as vital to make it fit for use completed? If so, what repairs were carried out, when were they completed and how much did they cost? If not, why not?
Thank you. Any member from the JLN have a constituency question? Mrs Beswick from Braddon.
My question is for the Minister for Health, Minister Barnett. A Flinders Island constituent recently travelled to Melbourne to seek medical treatment under the Patient Transport Assistance Scheme. They successfully received their medical treatment but extended their stay, delaying their return travel. As a result of the small delay in return travel, the constituent was ineligible for a full reimbursement under the scheme. The PTAS information on the website does not clearly advertise that a delay will negate reimbursement, and the application for reimbursement process commences after travel. Minister, considering the principle of equity underpinning the scheme, how is this fair to families who are relying on this funding to make medical treatment affordable?
Thank you, Mrs Beswick. We have 2 free-for-all questions. We will prioritise the member for Clark who has stood. Thank you, Mr Johnson.
My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, Fiona is a constituent of Clark and her 7-year-old daughter Emily lives with ketoacidosis, a condition that's accompanied by rapid onset of symptoms that can lead to severe ill health or death. Ketoacidosis is associated with diabetes, but for a definite diagnosis, Emily needs to see a paediatric endocrinologist, which is only available in Tasmania through the public health system. Despite Emily's paediatrician strongly advocating for Emily to see a paediatric endocrinologist, all requests for appointment have been refused. Emily's condition means she misses a lot of school and is constantly lethargic and drowsy, which I'm sure you agree is not much fun for a 7-year-old. Fiona would like to know why Emily is unable to obtain an appointment with a paediatric endocrinologist.
We have room for one more constituency question. The member for Franklin, Ms Brown.
My question is to the Premier. Premier, my constituent Peter is a former Liberal who lives on the Eastern Shore. He says the Liberal Party president informed him that, and I quote, they could not find anyone stupid enough to take on the role as Franklin chair given the depth of feeling in the Liberal members.
I'll hear the question and then decide if it's in order. Thank you.
And that, and I quote again, Dean Young was pressured to take on the position as part of getting a government job. Was Mr Young pressured to take on the role of Franklin Chair as a condition of his employment with Mr Barnett?
I appreciate the intent of the question. I'm sure we've all enjoyed it, but I will rule it out of order. Questions to ministers are to do with their portfolio areas, and unless the operations in that circumstance impact on their ability, on the Liberal Party's ability to govern, that may make it a relevant question. At this stage, I'd probably rule it out of order. But
maybe Mr. Abetz could answer the question.
It's not the yes. It's not. Sorry.
Bowled out on the first attempt.
No, I won't actually take that. I think that constituency questions are new. They are being tested. That was an appropriate process to ask for, Ms Brown. However, it strayed a little bit further than standing order number 2, which allows how questions are conducted. So a reframing may have got made brought into order, but we will rule that one out, and a written answer is not requested in the current form. At the end of constituency questions, does any honourable member have a petition to present? No petitions. Has any honourable minister papers to present? Yes, I call the Deputy Premier.
Thanks a lot, Madam Speaker. I table for the House notice of acquisition under Section 18 of the Land Acquisition Act 1993, Styx River Bridges, bridge replacements, municipal area of Derwent Valley. The notice of acquisition, same section, same act. Styx River Bridges, bridge replacements, municipal area of Derwent Valley. Same act, notice of acquisition, same act, same section, Channel Highway, Huon Link Road, Strata Corporation, municipal area of Huon Valley. And I table for the House the Energy in Tasmania Report 2022-23, issued by the Tasmanian Economic Regulator, March 2024.
Thank you. Minister, Leader of the House.
I seek to table Department for Education, Children and Young People, Tasmanian Assessment Standards and Certification Fees Regulations 2023.
Thank you. Minister for Health, I'm assuming? Yeah.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I table the National Health Funding Pool Annual Report 2022-23. And Madam Speaker, also table the Department of Justice Right to Information Annual Report 2022-23.
Thank you. Any further papers from ministers? Do any other honourable members have a paper to present? Does the clerk have any papers to present?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I table the Parliamentary Disclosure of Interest Act, primary return for the Honourable Member for Franklin, Mrs Petrusma.
I don't believe we're in receipt of any messages, clerk. No messages. Does any honourable member have a bill to introduce? Minister for Health.
Here.
Or Attorney General. Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to table the Sentencing Amendment Alcohol Treatment Order Bill 2024.
Thank you. The question is that the bill now be read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Clerk.
Bill for an Act to amend the Sentencing Act 1997.
Are there any further bills? There being no further bills, are there any formal business? Do we have formal business? No? Thank you. In that case, we're going to move to the matter of public importance. Before I call the matter of public importance on, sorry, I have to stand for this one. As members are aware, by tradition, there are restrictions upon new members contributing to debate prior to having made their inaugural speech. Now, that usually means that a member can contribute to an MPI debate, as Mr Garland did yesterday, but they're not able to move their own MPI. And in accordance with the rotation for the allocation of the MPI agreed by the House, it's the turn of the Jackie Lambie to move the group to move the MPI today. I do not wish to have another long debate about standing orders being needed to amend it today, so I'm using my discretion in order to not disadvantage members and have that debate again, and comply with the rotation that has been agreed by the House. I'm content to allow this to occur and will not treat this as the member's inaugural speech. And with that, I call the MPI.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to speak without spoiling my inaugural speech.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on a matter of public importance concerning the Wailancta Road. I've been asked to raise this matter by constituents on the East Coast following the announcement by the government in December that it would not proceed with the plans to seal the full length of the Wailancta Road between Copping and Orford. The reason put forward by the government was an investigation had revealed that it would not represent value for money for the Tasmanian people. I have to say that the financial reasoning doesn't seem to add up when you consider the $120 million East Coast tourism industry, which remains highly vulnerable to the highway closure at Paradise Gorge, plus the cost to residents in time and money with an extra hour and a half on their travel each day. No one on the East Coast has forgotten the disastrous 6 weeks closure of the highway in 2021, while they enabled them to remove fallen rocks. The disruption caused to the local residents, schools, businesses, and of course emergency services, where some residents had to be helicoptered out for further medical treatment. And thank God there wasn't a major fire incident. And of course, once again, the Tasmanian tourist business was severely affected. The real issue we have here is not the case of if, but when it will happen again. Because there was also a second partial road closure at Paradise Gorge in the following year of 2022. The East Coast community was reassured by the allocation of $1 million in the 22-23 budget to investigate the sealing of the Wailancta Road, and further encouraged by the comments of the Minister for Infrastructure during the debate last year, the state budget. The government's response, in paraphrase, was that it was committed to carry out a feasibility study for the second sealed access to the Tasman Highway through upgrading the Wailancta Road. We would like to see it sealed for its full length between Orford and Copping. We are particularly attracted to the vision from the point of view of tourism and providing a further route for vehicles travelling from the Tasmanian Peninsula. However, in December, the Minister released the Wailancta Road options analysis summary and said that the government had rejected the proposal to seal the full length of the road because of costs. Instead, the Minister said it would prepare to consider a cheaper option, and that the Liberal Party was committed in the election campaign to provide $6 million contribution as long as the federal government put in 80% of the money and costs. We now know that Wailancta Road was missing in action from the Australian federal government's announcement and its budget initiative this week. So, Madam Speaker, once again, the East Coast residents are feeling shortchanged, the tourism industry in particular, and to say the least, the outcome is very disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. As I call the Treasurer, I'll briefly welcome before they run away the students from Scotch Oakburn College. I know that the Treasurer and Deputy Premier is very happy to have them here, as are all members. I hope you enjoy the proceedings. Thank you, Treasurer. I give you the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I begin speaking on the matter of public importance, I appreciate that you've welcomed our students from our shared electorate of Bass from Scotch. It's great to have them here. I hope they're enjoying their visit to the Parliament House, which is a house for all Tasmanians. And I also express gratitude to my new parliamentary colleague, Mr Jenner, for bringing forward this matter of public importance. This has been a very disrupted journey, particularly for the communities that Mr Jenner has referred to in the Honourable Member's opening address, because the closure of the Tasman Highway through Paradise Gorge in 2021 was a major disruption, not just to the local community, but to people's wonder about what is the future of our road network resilience going forward. A quick recapping of history. It was in fact the then Mayor himself, It was the previous mayor of the council of Glamorgan Spring Bay who, as a frequent user of the road, actually identified and asked the question about some particular rocks through Paradise Gorge. On receipt of his question and his noting his real concern for safety, my office and the department ordered an investigation into that. Those particular rocks were quite sound, but the wider investigation identified some other rocks that showed that there was a real safety risk, a risk of rockfall that could happen in 1 month or in 10 years. That was uncertain, but nonetheless not stable. And the decision to close Paradise Gorge was fairly immediate and fairly disruptive. And we're all aware, I think, of the difficulty then of traffic from that south-east coast community to travel into its capital city by one of two paths, going through the long way, the Lake Leak Road, the sealed road back onto the Midland Highway, or to use the unsealed Wielangta Road, often known as W Road, which of course is unsealed and not owned by the government. It has 4 owners. And importantly, I want to take the opportunity to commend my team in State Growth who within 48 hours, with the support of the local councils, got that road into adequate condition with gravel and sheeting and grading to get it ready in the hours only that we had. And they did a great job. Since then, we've been focused on how we can make that network truly resilient. While the Tasmanian Government has no current management responsibilities for the road, we deployed workers there and got it going, and committed then to the feasibility study for a sealed access to the Tasman Highway through upgrading Wielangta Road. Unfortunately, as I think some people may have expected, the true cost of sealing that entire length of some 33 kilometres was identified, as Mr Jenner has said, of $90 million, and it doesn't pass the feasibility test question that ordinarily should apply, does apply. And we look to allocate precious public funds in the way that will provide the best benefit to the community. However, we've made commitments here. That's why in the last election, I, honouring my previous statements, indicated that the Tasmanian Government would allocate $6 million on the usual 80-20 share, which I will come to if there's time, toward a $32 million, a smaller scope project to upgrade the most important critical middle sections of Wielangta Road, where it's most wet, most covered by canopy, and needs the most work in terms of bridge replacements. That's a $32 million estimate project cost, and I've received really positive noises from the local federal Labor member, Mr Mitchell, who in good faith has said that he'll back it in as much as he can. And I'm not blaming Mr Mitchell, but I will say it wasn't in the federal budget this week. I would have liked it to have been. It isn't. And I dare to believe that we'll get it in through the MyEFO, noting that there's a federal election on the way, or at worst, an election commitment when the election is due by next May. I don't want it to be subject to those kind of timeframes. We'll be budgeting our funds in the budget to at least provide the opportunity for the state government to hold up its end of the deal. These are roads that we're not responsible for, but we would be prepared to grant those funds on condition and subject to the Australian Government meeting its proper share. Look, we're going to keep working on this. I'm grateful for the attention that the House has been able to give it here today. I want to see this going forward, and I also thank the state opposition, which I'm advised in the lead up to the 24 election, the recent election, the state opposition copied our policy, I think, if not word for word, basically the
Honourable
same,
member's time has expired.
which shows some bipartisan support for this initiative.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Clark, Mr Bailey.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the member for bringing this on. And as your inaugural MPI, it's a great topic, and from a Greens perspective, we're really keen to talk about Wielangta, and the road is an important part of Wielangta. It's that link between the East Coast and the Tasman Peninsula, but more so, it's an ingress into an incredible corner of Tasmania and an incredible corner of Tasmania's forests, and there is immense potential there, and certainly the road needs to create and deliver the ability to access that safely. Of course, there's the Sandspit River Conservation Area, there's the Cape Burn Area Nature Reserve, there's the Three Thumbs Reserve, and then there's the Wailangta Conservation Area. For decades, these were disjointed, quite beautiful, quite well-visited reserves, but they were disjointed. And then on adjacent private land, there was conservation covenanted area as well. Through the Tasmanian Forest Agreement, a whole range of state forest areas that linked up these forests were put into reserves. They are now part of the reserve network. They are future potential production forests, and they may well be part of the 40,000 hectares that the Liberal government want to open up and log again. Why were they put into reserves? Well, it's really simple. There are incredible trees there, incredible tall stands of blue gums. In fact, Wailangta is the Palawakani name for tall trees. There is incredible remnant rainforest in the Wailangta area. Glacial refugia, myrtle, sassafras and others in the wet valleys that have never burnt. And there are some incredible species. Of course, there's the wedge-tailed eagle, there's the Wailangta stag beetle and the swift parrot. And of course, there is immense amounts of carbon stored in that forest as well. And the importance of those species, and indeed the threat that they are under from logging, was completely exposed in 2007 when then Senator Bob Brown challenged the federal government and challenged the Regional Forest Agreement and its explicit exemption for logging from federal environment laws. And I note of interest, now Minister Abetz was the federal minister for logging at the time, and Senator Brown famously won that case. He proved that the RFA, and simply because the Regional Forest Agreement said that species would be protected, that did not necessarily demonstrate that those species were protected. What was Senator Betz's response to this? It wasn't to change the logging to actually fit the law. Of course, together with Paul Lennon, the then Premier, I believe, Minister Abetz and John Howard changed the law. They amended the Regional Forest Agreement to fit the logging. That is shameful indeed. That's the history of this area. There's now a 10,000 hectare block of forest that's part of the Tasmanian Reserve Estate. We will yet to see as to whether this is some of the forests that the Liberal government wants to give back to an industry that doesn't even want it. This is a potential new national park. A Wailangta National Park has long been proposed for the East Coast. There's already tours that are running through this area. There's proposals for mountain bike tracks in this area. There's a tramway. There's walks from the Sandspit River down to the old sawmill sites. It's an incredible spot that offers a massive amount of potential. It has incredible views across to Maria Island, and of course it's on that important tourist link between the East Coast and the Tasman Peninsula. I think the reason we're in this argument, as the Deputy Premier said, was that there are a number of owners, and there has always been a number of owners, including forestry companies. I think Forestry Tasmania and Guns used to share aspects of it and would regularly fight about who was responsible for its upkeep, and that's why, particularly when when those forests were not being logged, that they would fight about who would maintain it, and the road fell into a state of disrepair. Yeah. It is an important road link. We Greens do support ensuring that it is safe, that it is stable, that it allows access not only from the East Coast to the Tasman Peninsula and vice versa, but it allows access into those incredible tourism opportunities in there. What we need to do when it comes to tourism is make sure that people have more opportunities to do day activities in our great forests so that they will stay regionally, they'll stay at the Airbnb, they'll eat at the cafe, they'll drink at the pub. That's one of the opportunities. So we're not convinced that the $90 million spend is value for public money, but we're certainly supportive of more work being done so that this is a safe and accessible road.
Thank you. The honourable member's time's expired. The honourable member for Braddon, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Welcome to the students from Scotch Oakburn, and welcome to Mr Kerry Vincent, the newly elected member of the upper house. Unlike the Greens, I'm going to stick to the topic at hand and talk about my experiences, and thank Mr Jenner for bringing on this matter of public importance. And I remember quite vividly, Ms Deputy Speaker, the events that happened and occurred across that community when the road was closed, and it was very sudden. And this government's response to the concerns of the community wasn't quick enough. There was continued advocacy from that community over a period of many weeks around very serious concerns that they had, not only about the economic impact of that, about what that meant for people accessing essential services. I know I went down, and at the time I was acting leader of our party, and met with a number of people across that community that were concerned, from small business owners to local pharmacists, who was concerned about people's ability to get their medication and access to medical services. And it was a period of time where there was significant uncertainty for that community. And reflecting on it, I don't think the government handled that situation very well at all. And it reminds me of a similar situation on the North West Coast when we had issues with the Cam River Bridge. And mind you, we still really don't know what caused the Cam River Bridge to be partially closed. The government still hasn't been forthcoming around that. They've undertaken a feasibility study and a commitment to look at building a second crossing. But not unlike this situation, whenever the government is called upon to do something, they look at doing a feasibility study. And you can see that across a number of infrastructure projects across the state. I know that my colleagues and the Labor members for Lions have worked very closely with the community over the years around this issue. And we too reviewed that report that was done, I think, by KPMG. And at the last election, we made a similar commitment to that of the government. And I would ask the government to uphold that commitment, regardless of whether there was federal funding secured for this project or not. There are obviously things that need to be done around the ongoing maintenance of this road, restoration of bridges, making sure that it is a safe thoroughfare for people to use in the instance that there is another emergency in that community. And I would have thought if there are issues around a number of additional landowners across that stretch of road, that the government would be working constructively with them, with the local council, around roles and responsibilities for improving the maintenance and access across this critical piece of infrastructure for the people of the East Coast. Madam Deputy Speaker. This government, I want to bring you back obviously to that time, and there was, after lots of advocacy from the local community, financial support provided to businesses. You know, there was financial support provided around petrol. It took some time, but those things did occur. Similarly, on the North West Coast, when there was the partial closure of the Cam River Bridge, many members of the community, small business owners, people that had their ability to get to school, to get to the major hospital, significantly disrupted. There was no compensation provided by this government to those members of the community, and there should have been. A business like Young's Veggie Shed on the Bass Highway had their business severely disrupted, and this government did nothing to support them. And it was through no fault of their own that there was disruption to their small business. It was entirely at the foot of the government. And the government should have been working closely with those small business owners to understand exactly what their needs were at the time. And that's what eventually happened with the issues around Wailankta Road and the closure of the Tasman Highway. But it didn't happen under the severe disruption that we saw to the Bass Highway on the North West Coast. And at a time when he has time to do so, I would call on the Minister for Infrastructure to provide an update to the House on the feasibility study that's been done around a second Cam River crossing, to give certainty to the North West community that this is a priority project for your government, and that in the instance that there is a severe disruption again, that the economy and the community of the North West Coast stays connected. It's absolutely critical that this government provides certainty around this very important piece of infrastructure for our region. And I want to thank Mr Jenner for bringing forward this matter of public importance today. I've talked about a couple of different issues, but the principle remains. It's about the government planning for the future, doing audits around the safety and structure of roads and bridges.
Thank you. The honourable
across
member's
the
time's
state,
expired.
and making sure.
The honourable member for Lions, Ms White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise for two reasons. One, because the topic we're discussing is in my electorate of Lions, so I'm obviously quite interested to speak on this issue, but I'm also doing it as a bit of a filibuster, Madam Deputy Speaker. Don't tell anybody. We've got a member giving an inaugural speech very shortly, and just hoping that we can buy a little bit more time until all the family members arrive. And so I'm therefore just going to have a little chat about Willancta Road. How nice it is.
So honestly
I remember when the rockfall happened at Orford, and it was very disruptive in the middle of winter, and it was very hard for everybody who lived on the East Coast to cope in terms of travelling to and from the city if they had work or education, if they were running a business on the East Coast. Just getting basic supplies through was incredibly challenging. Traffic got diverted through Campbelltown and Lake Leak, and of course Willancta Road was opened up to enable access for vehicles who could go that way, to create a shortcut for people who are otherwise stuck on the East Coast. That was in 2021, if my memory is correct, because I can remember going along Willancta Road, and it was raining, and it had rained a lot. Obviously, with the rockfall had been a consequence of quite a lot of wet weather. But I was driving along Willancta Road. I had a four-wheel drive ute, so thankfully I was in a vehicle that was suitable. But I also was very, very pregnant at the time, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I can remember thinking, is this the wisest decision I've ever made? I think I was probably a week or two off giving birth, driving along a very wet and slippery Willancta Road where there's no phone reception. And for those of us who have the honour to represent the electorate of Lyons, we know that's a pretty common feature of our electorate and something that I'd love to see improved. Driving along a very slippery and muddy Willancta Road very slowly, because there are some pinch points on that road where the gradient is incredibly steep compared to other regular roads. And I'm sure this is also a consideration for whether or not it's appropriate to seal, because there need to be significant modifications made to that road in order for it to be at a standard that we would regard to be acceptable and safe. Anyway, made it through to the other end, came out at Orford, caught up with a couple of people, so probably some of the same people that Mr Jen has heard from as constituents on the East Coast who are advocating and lobbying and have been working very hard to see Willancta Road sealed. Met with them and then had to make my way back along that road, Madam Deputy Speaker. Anyway, got to the end, got home safely. Baby did not arrive unintended at a time it wasn't expected. And of course then we've had some further discussions, Mr Ferguson and I, across the estimates table about progress on the report that was commissioned by the government to look at sealing the Willancta Road, a report that took an extremely long time to finally be delivered to the Minister. A report that the Minister released late last year, early this year, all kind of melded into one, Madam Deputy Speaker, but ultimately providing advice to the government that there were options available to them, from repairing a couple of bridges in certain sections of the road right through to sealing, and what the costs associated with that might be. And what that ended up meaning is that the government took the advice to repair a couple of the bridges in certain sections of the road. Now, the land tenure of that section of road is complicated. It is privately owned in parts. It's owned by different councils in parts. There are sections where I think there are still disputes about who the responsible land manager is. And that, of course, adds complication. Of course, the government has powers to acquire land if it wished to do so, if it wanted to change the alignment of the road, or if it sought to seal the road to bring it up to an appropriate standard. But, of course, all of that has to be weighed against what the benefit is to the community, and, of course, the cost of the budget. And as the opposition leader has outlined to this place already today, the budget is under significant pressure. And there are competing priorities for government to weigh up every single day. And the question for the government, the minister, and of course us as Parliament is whether sealing a road is a higher priority than putting that capital funding into a different project like repairing a school or upgrading a hospital. And I think that's ultimately the test of whether or not it would be a good investment. I have a lot of sympathy for the people of the East Coast.
The Honourable Member for Lyons, Minister Howlett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to welcome to the chamber Mrs. Willie. Welcome, Jenny. Mr. President, and the honourable member for Prosser has departed, Mr. Kerry Vincent. Madam Speaker, during the works to manage the risk of rockfall on the Tasman Highway at Paradise Gorge, the section between Alford and Buckland was closed to traffic. This was an incredibly trying time for people in my electorate, Madam Speaker. The community was encouraged to take the alternative route via the Lake Leak and Midland Highway to access Alford and the East Coast or to from Hobart. The detour added up to 4 hours to the travelling time, while Wailangta Road could be used as a shorter alternative. However, due to its gravel road nature, it was not suitable for large volumes of traffic. The community expressed concern that there was no shorter sealed alternative route and requested the sealing of Wailangta Road to provide a shorter alternative route. The Tasmanian Liberal Government listened to the community concerns and acted, as the Minister has explained. The total length of the road requiring sealing is approximately 33 kilometres. This is a significant distance, not just to build, but to maintain in the future. The maintenance is a liability, which for its part the Glenmorgan Spring Bay Council has made it clear that it has no interest in taking on. There is a further combined total of approximately 4.7 kilometres of existing sealed surface along Kelavive Road and Brim Creek Road. This may require some rehabilitation or minor road widening to achieve a consistent width to improve road safety. Madam Speaker, the corridor has 4 road owners, including Glenmorgan Spring Bay Council, Sorell Council, Forico, and the Department of Natural Resources and Environment. I'm advised that the Department of State Growth has been engaging with these road owners since 2022 and will continue to engage with them during the project. Madam Speaker, the Liberal Party took its plan to invest $6 million on this project to the March 2024 election, focusing on the most important section of Wailangta Road. Remarkably, Madam Speaker, just a week later, this $6 million investment was repeated by Labor as a one-line dot point in its so-called infrastructure policy, 3 days before Tasmanians went to the polls. Given the lack of detail, we can only assume that the $6 million the opposition pledged was for the exact same section that the Liberal Party committed to. I can't check for myself, Madam Speaker, because all of Labor's election policies have disappeared by the new regime. Madam Speaker, I really hope Ms White...
Order. The honourable member will be heard in silence, please.
I really hope Ms White and Ms Butler will lobby their federal colleague, Brian Mitchell, to continue to lobby for him to fund the 6 kilometres of Wailangta Road, Madam Speaker, beginning with the section identified by the Tasmanian Liberal Government feasibility study, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, can I thank the Honourable Mr Jenner for bringing this very important motion to the House today. Thank you.
The honourable member for Lyons, Ms Badger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my fellow member for Lyons, Mr Jenner, for raising this very important matter. Much like my other fellow member for Lyons, Ms White, I spend an awful lot of time on the East Coast. I've run a tourism business there. I have lived there for many years, and I've seen the impact that not only the Wailangta Road had, but other similar single entry and exit roads right across Lyons. This is just one example of a far broader issue that we're seeing for regional and rural communities. It's time to have a big discussion about reassessing the safety and fit-for-purpose nature of our roads and various infrastructure, particularly when it comes to the safety of getting community out, the signage that's available for tourists as well. And a great example of this is the bushfires that happened in September
last year in Coles Bay when the road was blocked by a fallen burnt tree, and getting people out of the town had the fire have moved further south was going to prove incredibly difficult. There was no set plan in place. The tourists didn't know what to do. The community came to their rescue, setting up the town hall as an emergency shelter, but it shouldn't have come to that or fallen on stressed community members to pick up the pieces. There should have been a plan in place, an alternative to the single entry-exit road when it was blocked. The Cam River Bridge is another fantastic example of isolating different communities. We need to assess the liabilities of our infrastructure and ensure that they are going to be fit for purpose as we see climate change exacerbating natural events such as floods. We're going to see more landslips with more rocks fall on various roads. The other thing that we can do with roads such as Wailangta is to look at future tourism investment in the area. The proposed Wailangta National Park is just one example of that. We've also got a similar situation in the Styx Valley with the Styx Tourism Road. We have World Heritage valued tall trees at the end of that road, and it is very difficult for people to access parts of that. We need to be looking at roads that can have complementary benefits, safety, tourism and economic value to them, and invest in them appropriately, be it more signage, be it sealing them, or simply improving the quality of it so that they can be accessed by far more people. The Styx is another example in terms of getting people around safely. It offers another alternative exit for some of the regional towns such as Medina and Westaway if there were to be a bushfire that were to cut off the main highway there. So thank you again to the member, Mr Jenner, for raising this as one example of the much broader conversation that we need to have about our single entry exit roads and infrastructure.
Yeah. The question is that the matter be noted. Those with that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Orders of the day.
Order of the day number 2, address and reply, resumption of the adjourned debate.
Before I call the Honourable Member for Clark, Mr Willie, I remind the members that whilst it's his second first speech, it is the member's first speech, an inaugural speech in this House, and I ask that the House extend the usual courtesies to the member. I call the Honourable Member for Clark, Mr Willie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, I would like to acknowledge the Muwinina people, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, Nipaluna Hobart in Lutruwita, Tasmania. I acknowledge and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and I pay my respects to any members of the Tasmanian Aboriginal community here today. I acknowledge the continued connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to this land for well over 40,000 years. I acknowledge this land was never ceded and that the Tasmanian Aboriginal people survived invasion and dispossession, and they continue to maintain their identity and culture. Madam Speaker, it's with great pride I rise to deliver my inaugural speech in this place. Inaugural can mean new beginning, and for me, at this moment, it is a new beginning in the House of Assembly. Others might say I'm moving out of the frying pan and into the fire. As I embark on this new journey, it's important to acknowledge my time in the other place, where I've learnt so much, as well as building an understanding of different perspectives. If my former colleagues from the other place are listening, it wasn't you, it was me that changed in the end, but I cherish the time we spent together. I now have the rare opportunity to deliver one of these speeches in each house of the Tasmanian Parliament. The privilege to serve in both houses is not lost on me, and it's a responsibility I take very seriously. I'd like to thank the people of Elwick for allowing me to represent them for 8 years. I'm still a part of that community and I will always work for them. I now thank the people of Clark for trusting me to represent them too. In my first speech, I made a commitment to work at all times with determination, compassion and commitment. Today, I not only make that commitment as the member for Clark, but to the whole island in my new role as Shadow Treasurer.
I know the understanding I've built over time in different regions will inform my work in these new roles. Like so many Tasmanians, I have family connections across the state. I have one set of grandparents from Braddon, John and Mari. I spent a lot of my childhood visiting them in Somerset. I love the North West Coast and feel deeply connected to the region through my family. I remember all of the day trips to nearby towns like Wynyard, Penguin and Ulverston. Madam Speaker, I also have a set of grandparents from Bass, Alf and Mary. They were small business owners. Their business, Glasgow Engineering, has been running continuously in Launceston for 132 years. It's a fourth generation family business and my Uncle John is the managing director. I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I was a great disappointment to my nana that I ended up in this place and not as the fifth generation running the Glasgow. She did tell me she was immensely proud of me when I was elected back in 2016, but she later noted that I was on the wrong team. Spending all my childhood living a couple of doors down the road from Alf and Mary, they had a big influence on my life and how to live it, but definitely not on my politics. And I know there's members of Bass here today that knew Alf and Mary well, great people. Madam Speaker, as you know, I grew up in Launceston and I have lived my adult life in Hobart. The mates I had then, I still have today, and we are close. Like many Launceston kids, I left to go to university. I followed the trail blazed by many before me with the experiences of share houses and pubs and the occasional lecture thrown in. Other friends left to pursue their dreams working in hospitality on the mainland, and they've become very good at what they do. Whilst this trend has always been there, we lose too many good, hard-working Tasmanians for better opportunities elsewhere, which is costing our state dearly in terms of skills shortages and economic growth. On a personal level, it makes it exceptionally hard to catch up with close friends when they're so far away, especially when we all have young families. One of my goals in this place is to encourage more skilled Tasmanians to come back to the state and encourage others to stay. My close friends have been so important to me during difficult times in my life, but it is in Hobart where I met my wife, Holly. We share the aspirations of our community. Holly is everything to me. My colleagues will attest she makes me a better person through her intelligence, understanding and care. In my first speech, I spoke about us expecting our first child. Well, Alfie arrived healthy and happy, and now all of a sudden he's 7. He's a delightful kid, but where does the time go? He loves YouTube, and like many parents with children, we struggle with screen time constantly. Yeah. I'd be happy to take any advice on that matter. Teddy's little brother arrived not long after. He's a lot like his dad. He likes a bit of trouble or fun. He's very active, loves sport, and this year he started school full-time. And of course, he attends a fantastic local public school. Elsie is their baby sister, who's here today. She has a happy nature and a cheeky grin. We celebrated her first birthday during the campaign, but I was so time poor that her birthday decoration served as a backdrop for my Zoom meetings for the remainder of the campaign. Like others who work in this place, our families make huge sacrifices. I'm not seeking sympathy, and there's certainly not much of that in the community for politicians, but I want to express my gratitude to my family. I feel it deeply every day when I am with them and when I am away. I know sometimes the kids would like Dad to have a job like some of the other parents at school because they tell me. But I also know they want to support me, to be here, to make good decisions for our community, and that they are proud of me. So I guess there is a balance. I'd also like to thank my parents-in-law, Marilyn and Bruce, who are here today, who give so much love and support to our family at the drop of a hat when I might not be present. Speaking of gratitude, I would like to thank my campaign team who have supported my election to this chamber. There are many people to thank. We ran a very grassroots campaign and I was wonderfully supported by many letterboxes, door knockers, and people helping me get the message out in the community. Like all campaigns, there were a small group of individuals who put their lives on hold to support me whenever it was required. Thank you so much to Ellie, Morris, Geordie, Tessa and my mum Jenny. Your commitment to the Labor Party and to me has been unwavering, and I appreciate your solidarity. Madam Speaker, I know it is cliche, but the saying, life is a journey, not a destination, rings so true to me. People often hear me say it because it can bring perspective to a difficult decision or experience, and we learn from it. I've experienced highs and lows like many others. I spoke in my first speech how I miss my dad Mike, who would be so proud of moments like this. That will never go away. As an education leader in his community and a person with very humble beginnings and strong Labor values, I really wish I could turn to him for advice. Luckily, my mum provides plenty of support and encouragement. She is very proud too. She spent her life teaching in Tasmanian schools across the state and has a deep understanding of inequality in our communities. We're very close, and I'm thankful for the guidance of both my parents. I'm acutely aware not everyone is so lucky, and I guess when both of your parents have such strong social justice values, it's inevitable to become part of you too. I'll always miss my brother Jonathan, who died at a young age. Even all these years on, his loss is still very raw. I'll never forget the support and understanding of my mates during those teenage years that were so tough. Madam Speaker, we're all shaped by our life experience, and I know my experience has given me an insight into the importance and strength of community. At times, I've relied on strength, understanding and compassion of the community around me. Caring and kind communities make us all stronger. I am a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a teacher, a member of Parliament, and always a learner. I approach every day wanting to make a difference. That is how I came to be here. I've learned hard work accompanies opportunity, and education is lifelong. I know the difference that having an opportunity can make to a life. Not everyone is so fortunate to have that choice. And sometimes it doesn't have to be that complicated, like access to transport. I was particularly interested in a Mercury article recently where Oscar Wattersley and Conan Masuda spoke out about Tasmania's youth brain drain through their participation on the Committee for Greater Hobart. Among other important issues, they highlighted limited public transport options being a barrier to access other services like education and job opportunities. As a teacher, I know education is a tool of social justice and a vehicle for opportunity. As a member of this place, I know education is a fundamental driver of economic development, and it will underpin how we move into the future. Tasmanians in our regions need to have equal access to opportunity, equal access to education and skills and training to make their communities stronger. That's why being part of the Labor movement is so important to me. I'm aware that I stand on the shoulders of giants in being in this place today. The Labor movement is a guiding light. It has been the forefront of advocating for the rights of workers, challenging oppressive systems and championing social justice. It is a natural progression for me to be drawn to the Labor movement, a movement that reflects the resilience and strength of ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice. It knows true prosperity cannot be achieved when wealth and power are in the hands of a privileged few. It seeks to empower marginalised people and uplift their voices to create an inclusive society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Fighting for these values extends well beyond the workplace, and it crosses into every aspect of our lives, our communities, political systems, and importantly, policies that impact education, healthcare, housing and the environment. It offers hope for communities where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Madam Speaker, that's why being a Member of Parliament for Tasmanian Labor has been the greatest privilege. The party is over 100 years old and still going strong because of the values and the extraordinary people committed to the cause. I'll always be a servant, trying to give back and contribute after the opportunities it has afforded me. Madam Speaker, along with the Labor Party, I love this place. Over my 40 years, Tasmania has given me a good life. I'm grateful for the opportunities I have had, and I see my purpose here is to fight for others. The Tasmanian people have my greatest respect. I firmly believe Tasmania can become a beacon of hope and innovation in a world grappling with the urgent challenges of climate change, inequality, and unsustainable development. At the heart of this is our people, but we need to give them a fair go, not just some. I'm still passionately committed to improving education outcomes across our state because I believe it is the strongest thing that any state government could do to improve lives, not just economically, but socially too. Without an improved education system, our workforce issues will continue and we won't be prepared for the changing world. We need to plan to make the most of our opportunities as a state and realise our human potential. Better education and training will mean we have workers where we need them the most, and that of course means more jobs and better lives for Tasmanians. Despite these historical challenges, Tasmanians are resilient and determined. We share a unique island with rugged landscapes, and we are isolated yet connected more than ever to other parts of the world. Living on an island brings a culture of creativeness. We need to harness all the skills of our people in every sector to come together. We need to support small businesses too and work to bring jobs and opportunity to everyone, but also make sure Tasmanians are supported to live their best lives with quality education, skills and training, healthcare, housing, infrastructure and transport. We have such an opportunity at this moment to be smart, sustainable and inclusive as we confront climate change. We need to learn the lessons of the past, and sometimes they are painful lessons which are ingrained in our history. These lessons demonstrate the need to build a future that is rooted in empathy, compassion and solidarity. Madam Speaker, we live in a time of great uncertainty and chaos, yet in this environment we live in one of the most beautiful places on the earth. As an island, if we are smart and agile, we can lead the way. And we've done it before. Tasmanians built the hydro, we invested in it for 100 years and we've preserved large parts of our natural environment. The developed and developing world wants so much of what we have. A zero emissions economy powered by clean, renewable energy resources. Tasmania's emissions profile and renewable electricity assets provide a strong foundation for us to be leaders in emissions reduction and climate change mitigation, whilst also growing the economy and jobs. But we can't rest on our laurels. We need to redouble our efforts developing more renewable energy, particularly wind and hydrogen projects, to drive our economy. It is staggering that we haven't built any new generation assets since 2013. With more renewable energy production underpinning the Tasmanian economy, we can become world leaders in many other sectors, like transport in its different modes. I can think of one magnificent example of what's possible with innovative thinking, and that's Incat's new battery-powered passenger ship, which is being built in the heart of my electorate. But there are other opportunities too in agriculture, aquaculture and other advanced manufacturing, and eventually doing the hard things like producing green metals right here in Tasmania. Madam Speaker, progress doesn't need to come at the expense of the planet. But most of all, what we need to do is invest in and look after our people. On our small island, our communities and our fates are intertwined. Actions and decisions can reverberate across the entire community. That's why inclusivity lies at the heart of the way forward. We need to hear young people's voices. They are going to be the ones that lead us into an uncertain world. It's not good enough that there are young people who can't get to school on time because of poor public transport, like the young Tasmanians I heard on ABC radio during the election campaign. It's not good enough that rents are too high and that young people are stuck in the rent trap, and that the housing that they can afford is nowhere near their workplaces. We have to put more effort into making sure every voice is heard, every perspective is valued, and it empowers Tasmanians to contribute to the common good. We need to make sure that our decision-making processes are transparent and participatory to ensure that no one is left behind in our quest for progress. Madam Speaker, it's going to take a lot of work to improve our decision-making processes in this parliament and in the parliaments of the future. Processes need to move beyond the rhetoric of serving governments and become woven into the fabric of our societies. Our island should celebrate its diversity. It enriches all of us, and if we work together collectively, our differences make us stronger. And that includes in this place where we make decisions. From our schools and our workplaces, every corner of our island state should reflect the richness of the human experience, cultures, traditions and beliefs coming together for the common good. Parliament can and should do this too. In summary, Madam Speaker, when we live on an island, we need to defend each other. Our relative isolation in this place is deeply ingrained in our consciousness. In isolation, we can flourish by harnessing the power of innovation, investing in our people, lifting education standards, making our established industries more sustainable, and creating a society that is truly self-sufficient. Living on an island, we should understand that our strength lies in togetherness, in collaboration, and in solidarity. Madam Speaker, I might have disappointed my nana by not becoming an engineer, but in this place, my sleeves are rolled up and I'm ready to get to work.
Before I call on the next speaker for this debate, I will acknowledge the attendance in the gallery of Scotch Oakburn. I'm not sure if it's the same group we had before, but let's just wave hysterically at them anyway, because we're very pleased that they've joined us. And I'm sure that they enjoyed hearing the speech of an old boy of Scotch just then. Can I call on the next speaker, or have we got orders of the day? No? Mr Barnett, Minister for...
Yes, thanks very much, Madam Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate the new member of this House who's come down from upstairs and say what a wonderful contribution. So well done to Josh Willey, new member for Clark, with lots of handshakes and congratulations passing around the chamber, which is entirely appropriate. And to his wife Holly and family and friends, congratulations as well. So, Madam Speaker, as you know, this is the address in reply. I want to acknowledge those members in the chamber as well as those in the gallery, students from Scots College and elsewhere. Thank you very much for being here. This is the seat of democracy in Tasmania, hard at work. And in the new Parliament, a collaborative approach, and I would like to use the words goodwill as well, because that's what the community would be seeking of us, is to work in collaboration with goodwill to get the best outcomes for Tasmania. So the Governor has delivered the address and we're responding to that with contributions of up to 20 minutes, and I'm very pleased and proud to be part of the Rockcliffe Liberal Government, which is now in a historic fourth term in Tasmania, and it's just such a proud moment for certainly me, and I know others, to be part of a fourth-term Liberal government delivering on what matters for the people of Tasmania. I would like to congratulate all the new MPs as well. I've done that personally, but publicly here today, and say, of course, we have another member who's come down from upstairs, Jane Howlett, but all new MPs, I want to say congratulations, well done. The contributions last night, for example, from the member for Bass, Green members for Bass and Clark, excellent contributions. I really appreciate the observations about the kaleidoscope of views in this Parliament, which is probably more broad than I have ever seen before, and that's a healthy thing. and we want to make it good, to make it work, so that we can work together for really good outcomes on things that matter. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm really pleased and proud to be backing in the government's 2030 strong plan for Tasmania's future, because I'm excited about it, certainly in my portfolio areas, but across the government and for the community. Before I just touch on that, I just wanted to acknowledge my colleague and friend Mark Shelton for his wonderful representation of the people of Lyons, to be re-elected again with Jane Howlett and myself. Again, I've congratulated Jane. But to Mark, thank you for your service to the people of this state, and in particular recent years as Speaker. I thought you did an outstanding job as Speaker. You were impartial and fair. You ruled wisely, and I want to say thank you for being willing to be available again. And you are a grassroots member of Parliament. You connect with your local community. You have a wonderful wife in Maryland and family. You love your family, and that is appreciated. You are an excellent role model. We're all role models in this place, but Mark Shelton is an excellent role model for his community, and I want to acknowledge and pay a tribute to him today. The election has been had, and at this time I'd like to specifically thank all those in the Lyons electorate that supported me to be re-elected again, topping the Liberal poll. I acknowledge the Leader for the Opposition, as I did at the declaration of the polls, and congratulated her on a very strong result. And it's one of the toughest jobs in politics, being Leader for the Opposition, and I want to acknowledge that and pay a tribute again to Rebecca White. But right here and right now, I wanted to thank those that provided that support for me in the Lyons electorate and to me personally, and top of the list is my wife, Kate. I love you. Kate has supported me and been there shoulder to shoulder for 34 years, and in my 20 years this year in federal and state parliament, starting in February 2002, and then of course for 9.5 years in the federal Senate, and then now coming up to 10 years or 10 years now in the state parliament. So Kate, you are my rock. To all those that provided support, there are too many names to identify today, but they know who they are. They're volunteers. They gave of their time and effort for the campaign to me, and of course to the Rockcliffe Liberal team. And I often use the words Team Tasmania working together, and I hope that together Team Tasmania in this Parliament can get the job done during this historic fourth term. We need to work together in collaboration with goodwill to get positive outcomes on things that matter. So thank you to Premier Rockcliffe for reappointing me to each of the portfolios: Attorney General, Minister for Justice, Minister for Health, Minister for Veterans Affairs, and I'm delighted and honoured to take on that new responsibility of mental health and wellbeing. It's a real privilege to be in that space, as I shared last night on the adjournment. I cannot follow in the very big shoes of the Premier, former Minister. Those shoes are way too big, but I will be addressing this and advocating in this portfolio from my own shoes and from my own experience, but I'm really looking forward to it, and I thank all those that I've met over the last many weeks in terms of stakeholders, people with lived experience, and of course in the department, and those that are delivering the services. It's fantastic. It's a great privilege to be an Attorney General and Minister for Justice, and I'm very pleased to be leading these important legislative reforms to ensure Tasmanians have the access to justice and support, and to promote a justice system. Separation of powers is incredibly important. Here we are in the Parliament, one of the three legs of the stool, and the other two being the executive and the judiciary. And of course, there needs to be a balance between the three. But I'm an absolute strong supporter of the justice system and the rule of law. I was pleased and honoured to address the ceremonial sitting of the Supreme Court to mark the Supreme Court's bicentenary last Friday. Thank you for the hear, the member for Braddon. Very important. In fact, Tasmania's Supreme Court is the oldest Supreme Court in all of Australia, 7 days older than that of New South Wales. And I'm pleased and proud of that. It was honoured to present last week on that occasion. And of course, the Supreme Court of Van Diemen's Land by the Sovereign under the Third Charter of Justice, and it was created at that time on the 10th of May. The Supreme Court remains an essential and core element in upholding and strengthening our democracy and the rule of law. And of course, the rule of law is so important, going all the way back, not just 200 years, but going back to the Magna Carta, more than 800 years ago, where Chapter 40 of the Magna Carta says, in terms of that document, it says the so-called, quote, invisible cargo of the First Fleet states, to no one will we sell, to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice, close quotes. So that ancient principle, it's an essential legal and constitutional principle through and from the British Empire, and forms the foundation of the court and its role as an independent and impartial tribunal. And of course, that court is part of the unbroken thread that connects us to the British legal system and the democratic tradition and the Judeo-Christian ethic on which it rests. So following the ceremonial sitting, I attended the launch of Justice Stephen Estcourt's new book, From Convicts to Computers, 200 Years of the Tasmanian Supreme Court. And as the title suggests, it traces the 200 years of the court, and perused it again last night. And I just want to say congratulations and thanks to Judge Stephen Estcourt. And I was honoured to be presented with a copy of the book by Justice Estcourt just a week or so ago. So we are celebrating our legal system, in fact, with the important role it plays. That'll be continued next week with Law Week, and it begins on the 20th of May. And Law Week's the annual event held in May each year across all Australian jurisdictions, and the program of events and activities occurring is designed to raise awareness within the Tasmanian community of the role of the legal profession and the law, providing access to justice in Tasmania. And I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Legal Profession Board and, of course, Law Week, and look forward to hosting in this place on Tuesday recognition where we will hear from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on the 200 years of the Supreme Court, and we'll hear from Kristen Wiley with respect to the 50-year anniversary of legal aid in Australia and in Tasmania. And really looking forward to marking those events next Tuesday in this Parliament to pay honour and respect accordingly. But our government's reform agenda is very clear, and that's about delivering and prioritising community safety, enhancing the rights of victims of crime, providing a strong deterrent to criminal behaviour, reducing the risk of reoffending, and protecting the rights of all Tasmanians. We are committed, as the Premier said many times and others, to the Commission of Inquiry and acting on the 191 recommendations outlined in the Commission, including the 54 legislative reforms of which I'll be certainly very involved. It is a legislative priority of our government. In terms of other efforts under our 2030 Strong Plan for Tasmania's future, be more than happy to speak to those in due course. We've already delivered so much in terms of law reform, and there's more to do. I do want to acknowledge the former attorney, Elise Archer, and thank her for her steadfast leadership over a long period of time in delivering on those reforms. Of course, there are a range of other matters I'd like to address, but in the time available, I want to touch on health, mental health and wellbeing, and again, what a real honour it is to be in that space. And of course, I have a lived experience of somebody with type 1 diabetes since the 15th of January 1997, my wife's birthday, when I was diagnosed with type 1. And so, yeah, it was a big shock at the time, but I have absolutely appreciated, and I thank God for my diabetes, because I've been able to advocate for and connect with and support other people with diabetes, whether it's type 1, type 2, gestational diabetes and the like. And I love supporting and advocating for people with diabetes and their families, and indeed those at risk, and played a key role as an ambassador for Diabetes Australia for, I think, well, certainly more than a decade at the federal level and at the state level, and it's a real honour I have resigned that position now, of course, but it's a real honour. And of course, my dad had motor neurone disease, and there's connections there. Yesterday, Helen Burnett made contributions in this place in her inaugural speech, and I look forward to working across the Parliament in a collaborative way with all MPs to deliver better healthcare outcomes, to build a better health system. And of course, we're delivering those record funds, $8.3 million a day. And on health services, we've employed 2,500 new healthcare workers since we've come to government 10 years ago, 1,390 of those nurses and midwives. And of course, we just celebrated International Nurse Day last Sunday. It was wonderful, special day, an acknowledgement. Include 2 new inductees into the roll of honour in terms of nurses and midwives, and of course scholarships, another 120 scholarships to support further education and training. And indeed, last Sunday was special in the mental health space as well, with the new Mothers and Babies commitment, $9 million commitment, 4-bed facility with daycare support based at the Launceston Health Hub in the north. And that service will be made available to across the north, northwest and elsewhere in the north. So I'm really excited about that. Of course, we've got the $70 million commitment with the Launceston Health Hub to build a new hospital, and that commitment is progressing as well. We've got a very strong plan for Tasmania's future when it comes to health, and a raft of measures. I do need to reflect on the federal budget of 2 days ago and to say how disappointed I am. We did not get our fair share when it comes to the urgent care clinics and the support for primary health care. This is a responsibility of the federal government, pure and simple. This is their responsibility. GPs are independent private organisations, and they are supported through Medicare by the federal government. It is hard for many Tasmanians to get access to a GP, and it's time they stepped up. Yes, we have stepped up and stepped in with respect to St Mary's, Bridgewater, East Devonport, and just in the last 7 days now at Glenorchy. We shouldn't have to. Through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, we shouldn't have to. This is a federal responsibility, but we are, because we know it's vital to the Tasmanian people. And we want to get on with the job. So we've got the GP now, rapid response team in place. We've got the commitment to get another 40 new GPs in rural and regional areas by picking up their HECS fees of up to $100,000. We've got the funding support for GP practices to $250,000 grants to provide that better healthcare across Tasmania. We're really excited about that and to see that rolling out. And yes, we do have measures in place to end ramping. We made that commitment during the campaign, and that commitment is now being delivered. I was on radio this morning talking about the improvements, incremental improvements, where we're all in every major hospital across Tasmania. We've hit that target or above the target for each hospital for the last 7 days. Now, of course, it goes up and down a bit, but I'm so pleased and proud, and I thank our healthcare workers for stepping up and delivering that awesome care, consistent with the report and recommendations of the independent experts, and delivering on that. So thank you so much for that. We've got an array of commitments to support better healthcare across Tasmania in the years ahead, and I'm really wrapped about that. We're investing the purpose-built $82.5 million 40-bed older persons mental health complex out at St John's Park Health and Wellbeing Precinct, and a $7.6 million mental health hub in Devonport. I mentioned earlier in an answer to a question this morning the $187 million commitment to the Royal Hobart Hospital, more than $170 million up the northwest in the master plan. We've got, of course, $53.5 million for near doubling the emergency department at the Launceston General Hospital. Yep. And I see the nodding of the new member for Bass, Rob Fairs, and I congratulate you on your election and your terrific support for the healthcare sector in Launceston and in the electorate of Bass. It's been great working with you these last few weeks. But you've got nearly $500 million of commitment in terms of delivering that capital. And I've mentioned Rob Fairs, but it was great just standing and getting that support from Rob and others for the Northern Heart Centre in Launceston. You know, this is a $120 million commitment over the next 5 years, and it's consistent with expert advice, and I'm really wrapped with that. It's really an exciting thing. Tasmania has amongst the highest rates of heart disease in all of Australia, North West Coast in particular. So this will absolutely help address that. I'm really looking forward to delivering on that. So there's a lot more to do in that space, and in the few moments I have left, just to indicate that we will not stop lobbying Canberra for the funding support that we need to deliver the healthcare services that Tasmanians need. And I would ask all members of this parliament to do what they can to reach out to their federal MPs in their electorate or in their area to say, look, Tasmania needs more support. This is a responsibility that you have, not just for our hospitals, but specifically in the primary healthcare area, whether it's GP after hours support or through mental health services. And I want to say thank you to Emma McBride. I met her recently, now twice, once online, once in person. She's the Federal Minister, Assistant Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing and Suicide Prevention. They were really good meetings, really collaborative and positive meetings where we're working together, supporting our veterans as well in terms of their mental health and wellbeing. So I wanted to say that. And just in the few moments left in terms of our veterans, there's 17,500 in Tasmania and their families. They deserve honour and respect. I want to say what a wonderful Anzac Day it was where we were able to do that, and I know many members around this chamber were involved. Thank you to RSL Tasmania for being the peak body. We have identified you as a peak body for veterans, and they undertake very important special projects and are wonderful advocates. And I enjoy working with them as well as the other ex-service organisations, Vietnam Veterans, and a whole host of others. I absolutely, it's one of the great opportunities. I reckon I've got the best job in the world. I love my job. I love helping and supporting the community and my stakeholders and my constituents to get a best outcome. We're focused on the things that matter, and that's what we need to do in this chamber. And I really look forward to continuing to do that over the next 4 years and beyond. It's a very exciting time for our government and for our community, and I thank the House for the opportunity to share these remarks.
The honourable member's time has expired. Thank you. The honourable member for Clark, Ms Haddad.
Here. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This parliament represents a significantly changed one where the House of Assembly has been restored to a 35-seat chamber for the first time in over 2 decades. And I want to congratulate the 10 new members elected to represent their communities in this place, the last election. It's indeed a true honour and a solemn responsibility to fill one of these 35 seats, to come to this place, to bring the stories and experiences of the people and communities we represent, and to work hard every day to make sure we do the very best we can to represent their needs through the work we do here. Madam Deputy Speaker, I formed part of the committee that considered the bill to restore the Parliament to 35 seats, along with my Labor colleague Anita Dow, yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker, and former members Joan Ryler and Sue Hickey. And the committee was chaired by former Greens leader Cassie O'Connor, who was the sponsor of the bill. That's the first time I was able to participate in a select committee in this place, and the experience was an overwhelmingly good one. It was the first time I saw politicians of every colour take off their political hat and instead work exclusively on hearing evidence and making evidence-informed policy recommendations. We heard from community members and leaders, academics, political experts and commentators, as well as leaders of all 3 political parties, Labor, Liberals and the Greens. And each of those leaders spoke to us clearly about the serious damage the reduction in the size of Parliament had done to the way that this place operates. There's no doubt that 10 new politicians is not something that's widely or deeply popular in the general public. As I've said in this place before, even yesterday, each of us here today is doing this job at a time when trust in our profession is at an all-time low. It is incumbent on each of us to do all that we can to restore that trust in politics and show people of Tasmania that they can have faith and trust in the jobs we do here and in the institution of Parliament and the institutions that we oversee as parliamentarians. But what we heard at that committee is that reducing the size of the Parliament meant that this place didn't operate how it used to or in the best interests of Tasmanian democracy. There were fundamental building blocks of how parliaments like ours are meant to operate that were significantly damaged by that reduction. So it is a positive thing indeed that this is now changed and the Parliament will be the better for it. I wish to congratulate each of the newly elected members. To my new Labor colleague Meg Brown, congratulations on your very well-deserved win. You ran a truly grassroots campaign and thoroughly deserve your success. And while I've enjoyed working with you for a while now in the Labor Party, I know that I'm going to really enjoy working with you in the caucus room, and you're already working so hard for your community and bringing a breath of fresh air to our caucus room. Congratulations to the 3 Jackie Lambie Network members. It's quite historic to have a new minor party represented in this place. And while I know you've copped a fair bit of criticism over the deal that you signed with the Liberal Party, which we saw tie your vote yesterday when the government wound back question time by half an hour, I encourage you to stay true to your values and vote with your hearts and your consciences in this place. Congratulations too to the newly elected Greens members, Ms Burnett, who I know well from her time on Hobart Council, Ms Rossell, Ms Badger, and the new Liberal members, Ms Howlett and Mr Fairs, as well as yourself, Mrs Patrice, returning to this place, and to the new independent member, Mr Garland. I've really enjoyed hearing the inaugural speeches of those of you who've spoken so far this week, and I look forward to hearing more inaugural speeches about your passions, your motivations, and your plans for your time in this place. In particular, I want to congratulate my new, continuing Labor colleague, Josh Willey. What a fantastic inaugural speech we just heard. Josh and I have already worked together for many years, both in the Labor Party and in the Parliament, while Josh was member for Elwick in the other place. And as members know, Elwick takes in most of the northern suburbs of my electorate of Clark. I know we will work so well together, serving the people of Clark from the Bridgewater Bridge in the north to the northern tip of Kingston in the south and everywhere in between. I look forward to working hard with you to continue increasing the Labor vote in Clark to make sure that we can get a few more colleagues in here at the next election. To the other Labor candidates who ran alongside us, I want to say a huge thank you. It's not easy running an election campaign, especially when you don't get to win. So I want to say a huge thanks to my friend and colleague Stuart Benson, to Simon Davis, John Kamara, Rebecca Prince and Susan Wallace. Each of you ran excellent campaigns and deserve to be elected to this place. Hare Clark can be a difficult electoral system to campaign in. It's, in my view, one of the most democratic systems there is, but it can feel really hard campaigning in what feels like competition against your own. But I can honestly say that the 2024 election was the most collegial and harmonious Hare Clark election I've ever been involved with, either as a candidate or a volunteer, and I thank you for the work you did to build our Labor vote. I know that the last campaign won't be the last for any of you, and I'm committed to working alongside each of you until we see you elected. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to recognise my colleague, comrade and dear friend Rebecca White. It's already been said by many, Rebecca is the best Premier this state never had. While of course we need to respect the will of the Tasmanian people in having returned the Liberals to government, one of the biggest regrets that I have from our recent election loss is the reality that Tasmania is missing out on seeing just what a phenomenal Premier Rebecca would have made for our state. Many of you might not know this, but I worked in Rebecca's office when she was newly elected back in 2010. A bit like me in 2018, Rebecca wasn't expected to be elected at that election. She was elected against the odds. She hit the ground running as a Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business, and we set about working hard in this portfolio that was new to both of us, running forums and workshops around the state to hear from business operators and contribute to the economic development plan that the Labor government was working on to set Tasmania up for a bright future. I've worked for lots of other MPs in the past, and I can safely say that Rebecca is the hardest working, the most committed and the most passionate. She stands head and shoulders above most of us and has been an outstanding leader for our party and our movement. I was proud to work with you in your office back then, Rebecca, and I was really proud to serve in your shadow cabinet for the last 6 years. But most of all, I'm proud to call you a friend, and I'm glad we get to keep working together in this Parliament. To our new leader, Dean Winter, I give my full support. I know Dean will make an excellent Labor leader and hopefully in the not too distant future an excellent Labor Premier. Thank you for the opportunity to take on the new portfolio challenges of health, mental health and wellbeing, community services and disability. These are key portfolios to our party and movement and are sincere passions of mine. Having spent roughly a decade working and volunteering in the health and community services sector, in the alcohol and drug community sector and in the public sector in health and human services, I have seen firsthand what happens when people cannot access the care they need. the primary care, the preventative health care or the acute care when they need it most. It's these people and their stories who I seek to represent in carrying these portfolios. It's their experiences that will inform the policies we put forward and build on, along with the outstanding policies we took to the election under my colleague Anita Dow's time as Shadow Health Minister. For too long, Tasmanians have been missing out. After 10 years of Liberal Party neglect, we are now facing the worst health crisis and the worst housing crisis in the state's history, and people are suffering now more than ever. I'm incredibly proud of the policies we took forward to the election. I know they would have made a profound impact on the lives of Tasmanians at every level. While there are some who cynically try to dishonestly argue that there is no difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, I know that that is absolutely and demonstrably false. They do this for base politics and political gain alone. The fact is, we are fundamentally different movements. We are driven by entirely and fundamentally different values and priorities. It's the Labor Party that is driven by the values of equality, social justice and fairness, of the value of safe, secure, well-paid jobs, of collective action and of the power of people to make grassroots-led change. It's the Labor Party that puts people at the heart of every decision we make in government. And the policies we took forward at the recent election did just that and would have made an enormous impact on our state. Things like increasing social and public housing as well as affordable private rentals to increase supply and reduce rents. Establishing a public sector housing maintenance workforce that would have guaranteed secure, well-paid public sector jobs and apprenticeship pathways, as well as dignity and respect for housing tenants. A standalone court for children and young people that would have tackled the causes of youth offending and addressed those causes through a therapeutic justice system, as well as a raft of health policies and health commitments that would have improved access, focused on prevention and delivering care in our regions. Madam Deputy Speaker, finally I want to thank the people who contributed to my election campaign. I've said to my small election campaign team that my success in being elected to this place is really their success, because our tight little core team has been around since 2017 and it's so dedicated, so committed and so deeply connected to our community. We've fought 3 elections together now, 2 of them called months early, one over a year early, and each time we've been ready to go. I'm really lucky to have that same team around me right from the very start. It feels quite overwhelming at times because I've volunteered my time to Labor Party campaigns since I was a teenager, but it feels entirely different to know that others are willing to give up their time and volunteer for you. So we've done it as a team. I was elected last in 2018 against the odds and not expected to make it here on my first try. Then I was elected third in 2021 and I was fortunate enough to be elected first for the electorate of Clark this election. That's a responsibility and an honour that I don't take for granted and which I am extremely grateful for the people of Clark for placing on me. So to my core team, Natalie Jones, Scott Plimpton, Michael Fitzgerald, Claire Vickers and Terry Orlick, thank you so much. Since 2017, our core team has grown substantially, so I want to thank those who came onto our campaign team this year. To my incredible electorate officers, Jane Atkinson and Emma Bridge, thank you. 2 semi-retired, extremely experienced women who many would say are quite overqualified for the job. I'm very lucky to have you job sharing the one position in my electorate office and I'm lucky and proud to work alongside you both. To Stuart Jackson, who worked in my electorate office until the campaign began, and he then took on a policy role in the Leader's office. He's now moved to the mainland to work for a Labor senator, and I can't wait to see his career continue to grow and rise. To my dear friends Robin Black and Catherine Wakefield, thank you for being part of our core team this year, but also for the incredible amount of work you put in over the campaign, not only printing, folding and stuffing envelopes with direct mail, but also delivering the lion's share of that mail single-handedly around the electorate. Most of all to my beloved mum Anne Ripper, you've always supported me in every way, but this last election was something absolutely next level. My mum had just retired before the election got called and she was very much deserving of a break after a very long and hard-working career, but instead she took on the enormous task of coordinating all of the letterboxing for my campaign. She worked tirelessly for 5 weeks without being paid a cent and with the tough task of getting the whole electorate letterboxed in just a few weeks. She found it quite daunting at the beginning, but by the end we had the most organised colour-coded Excel spreadsheet that I've ever seen, with a system of post-it notes and instructions for volunteers on which packs had hillier areas. It's most of my electorate, but we did it, and that's down to my mum, so thank you. To my sister Alex Haddad and her partner Bruce, my dad George and my daughters Charlie and Lucy, thank you for the support that you show me and being the best family anyone could hope for. To the CFMEU, thank you for your support both to me and to the Labor Party state campaign. Thank you for seeing and valuing the quality of the housing policy that we put forward during the election, and for recognising the impact that that policy would have on the Tasmanian people with tangible and welcome support. Finally, I want to thank every person who contributed to my campaign and to the broader Labor Party campaign. To every Labor Party member and every union member who joined a campaign team, who door knocked, who made phone calls, who letterboxed, especially on those hilly parts of our state, thank you. Your efforts are not in vain. Every conversation that you had during the election campaign about the value of supporting the Labor Party counts, and will continue to build on those conversations and important work into the future. Thank you in particular to Rebecca Flanagan and Anne Carswell, who are door-knocking legends and came out with me most days in our little team. Thank you for doing that again this time around. Thanks also to my dear friend Hilary Smith, to her baby Stella, and to Bish Adhikari and Monju Joshi for the roles that you played in my campaign. And finally, a big thank you to interstate friends and comrades who travelled to Tasmania, especially to door knock, not just with me, but to support the broader Labor campaign. To Melissa, Maddie and Zach, to Harry, Braith, Flynn, Georgia, Liam and Lucy, to Declan, Daniel, Jacob and Kathy, to Kylie, Elizabeth, Emma, Rhett, Dean, Lisa, Corey, Chris, Jimmy and Joe. Thank you for the part you played in our campaign. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Madam Deputy Speaker, I move that the debate be adjourned until a later hour.
The question is that that motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those to the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, order of the day number 3.
Order of the day number 3, appropriation, further supplementary appropriation for 2023-24, second reading.
Honourable Treasurer.
I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I move the bill be read a second time. The appropriation, further supplementary appropriation for the 2023-24 bill, 2024, seeks a supplementary appropriation of $82.050 million from the public account for this financial year. Of this amount, $74 million represents an operating services appropriation to Finance General. This amount is to be applied for the purposes of delivering the government's commitment to pay a supercharged renewable energy dividend of $250 to households and $300 for small businesses, including embedded network customers. The bill also seeks additional operating services appropriation of $8.050 million for the Department of State Growth. For members' benefit, of this amount, $5.25 million is to be appropriated for the purpose of funding and administering 2 grant programs: King and Flinders Island, Primary Producers, Seasonal Conditions and Mainland Tasmania, Livestock Producers, Seasonal Conditions Scheme, to provide relief to eligible primary production livestock businesses on King and Flinders Island and mainland Tasmania that have or are expected to experience financial impact causing some hardship due to extended dry conditions. Funding will also be provided to the Rural Relief Fund to be administered through Rural Business Tasmania. Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill also provides $300,000 for an initial grant to Ferment Tasmania to assist with the fit-out and equipping of their fermentation hub at Lagana in the Tamar Valley. The amount relates to a 2024 state election commitment to provide a $1.7 million state government contribution for the creation of a purpose-built fermentation facility to support Tasmania's agricultural producers for value-adding to their produce, creating products such as bread, wine, cheese, cider, whiskey, sauerkraut, as well as creating jobs in the Tamar Valley. Construction of the facility is due to be completed by the end of the year and be operational in early 2025. Madam Deputy Speaker, finally, $5 million is sought for an initial grant to the Devonport City Council towards its Sports Infrastructure Priority Investment Plan, Building a Sporting Legacy, to deliver state-of-the-art sporting and community infrastructure for the region. The amount relates to a 2024 state election commitment to provide a $25 million Tasmanian Government contribution to the $60 million investment plan, which includes the development of an indoor stadium and sporting facilities at the Devonport Oval Precinct, along with investment in the Valley Road Regional Football Centre. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Clark, Mr Willie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate you on becoming the Deputy Speaker and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
It's also my great privilege to stand here and work through my first bill as the Shadow Treasurer. I'd be the first to admit that I've got a lot to learn, always a learner, as I said in my speech earlier today. But it's a challenge that I'm willing to take on and do my best for Tasmania. Appropriation bills have become much more common in recent years, and we've seen a number of sizeable appropriation bills in recent times, including one just recently for the Commission of Inquiry and the injection into Metro, which was much needed. I know from my former time as the Shadow Minister for Transport that Metro needed a boost, and it was very welcome by the workforce there in particular. But it's not the only way that supplementary appropriations can happen, Madam Deputy Speaker. For smaller amounts, there's a Section 20 transfers or appropriations for appropriated amounts that get transferred from one line item within and across departments. There's a Section 21 provision, spending of the Treasurer's Reserve, where amounts that have been appropriated have been spent, and in the current budget there's a $50 million line item there for unexpected outlays, noting that that has been reduced from COVID times from $150 million, and the Treasurer and I have had a number of discussions across the committee table about that particular provision in the budget in the Public Accounts Committee. There's Section 22 amounts where an appropriation is needed in cases where Commonwealth grants are more than what is contemplated by the original government budget to be received, always a welcome scenario. And Section 30 amounts where the government has approved emergency funding. And then any of these movements are then reported through the supplementary estimates. The bill before us, though, provides some parliamentary scrutiny for a large amount. It's a bill that's appropriating $82.05 million for the public account for the services of government for the financial year ending 30 June 2024. This is an appropriation for operating services, namely the renewable energy dividend of $74 million in 2023-24 and $8.050 million for operating services for the Department of State Growth. A welcome dividend for a lot of households that are struggling at the moment, Madam Deputy President, with household bills. 254,000 households, I'm told, will receive a $250 dividend, and 35,000 businesses will receive $300. State growth component of this includes $5.250 million for relief for emergency primary livestock businesses on King and Flinders Island, and I've been listening to the media, particularly radio, when you drive around the car, Tas Country, from time to time, and I've been listening intently about the hardship our fellow Tasmanians are experiencing on King and Flinders Island because of the dry conditions there, and it's just heart-wrenching, absolutely heart-wrenching what they're going through. So this support is absolutely necessary and well supported by the Labor Party. There's $300,000 for Fermen Tasmania, which I believe is an election commitment. And $2.5 million for the Devonport Precinct, Sports Precinct, which is an election commitment too, and it was pleasing to see the Liberal Party match the Labor Party's commitment in the election.
I'd had a number of engagements with the Devonport City Council around that particular development in the lead up to the state election as the Shadow Minister for Sport. They had a funding shortfall, and it seemed like a no-brainer to me, and it's pleasing it's got bipartisan support, that the $25 million will activate that development. And it's a very smart development in terms of getting a facility that's providing world-class facilities for multiple sports, which is what we need to do more of, making sure that we're getting high usage for the taxpayers' investment. I've got some questions for you, though, for the Treasurer through the Deputy Speaker. Yesterday in the briefing, I was told that the supply bills that are coming up, I know that's not before us, don't contain election commitments, and that this appropriation bill clearly does contain election commitments. And the question I have is, how is the government going to deliver its 100-day plan when it contains many election commitments, but it seems like there will not be approval from Parliament for the appropriations to fund those commitments? And there's a couple of commitments in here that are in the 100-day plan, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're just talking about the Devonport Building and Sporting Legacy Precinct Plan. Within 100 days, deliver the $25 million required towards the Devonport Building and Sporting Legacy Precinct Plan to unlock the Devonport City Council's $60 million community development. I'm interested in how that's going to be funded within 100 days, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Fermen Tasmania, there's an initial payment, and I believe from the briefing that these initial payments have been done through negotiation by the Department of State Growth and the stakeholders involved. I'm just trying to find where Fermen Tas is in this document here. So also within the 100-day plan is to provide funding of $1.7 million to Fermen Tasmania to fit out and complete its hub at Lagana in the Tamar Valley, so it can be up and running in early 2025. So we have $300,000 here as an initial payment. Where is the rest going to be funded from within the 100 days is the question for the Treasurer. And I'll make it very clear that we're not questioning these projects. They're very valuable projects that we support. But given that the supply bills that are coming up later in the day apparently have no election commitments in them, how is quite a lot of this stuff going to be delivered? And there's other things in here too, like deliver within 30 days the $1 million promise towards marine rescue vehicles, trailers and vessels committed to the 7 volunteer marine rescue units around the state. I won't read out this whole document, but there are a number of commitments in here within 100 days that require funding, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm interested in how that's going to work. Is it the department that will have to find the funding within their existing allocation? Because certainly by what it seems is there isn't an approval from Parliament to deliver these election commitments yet. So that's mainly my concern with this bill. I do note that the quarterly report was out yesterday, the budget update, Madam Deputy Speaker. Got a deteriorating position for the financial year, nearly $600 million of deficits. And here we are appropriating more, or more approvals for spending. And as I noted at the outset in my initial comments, it seems to be more commonplace that we're doing this now. From my first time in Parliament around 2016. And I think that that time in Parliament, in the other place, in that 8 years, I have certainly noticed a difference from this government in terms of budget discipline. The former Treasurer, Peter Gutwin, was very rigid in how he managed the budget. And I would say quite disciplined, even though I disagreed with some of the decisions he was making, but we're not seeing that same discipline from the current government. We're seeing things funded outside the budget cycle quite frequently. We're seeing appropriation bills come to Parliament. We're seeing a deteriorating budget position, record deficits and debt across the forward estimates. It's certainly a very different attitude, Madam Deputy Speaker, from Liberal governments past. And it is concerning. And it's not just me saying that as the Shadow Treasurer. There are highly qualified, highly respected people in the community, people like Saul Eslake, that are raising the alarm bells too. And it's interesting that the budget's going to be delivered in September, significantly late. I might leave some of those remarks for the next debate, but there's $1.7 billion of additional commitments that the Liberal Party made in the election that now have to be shoehorned into a budget that is deteriorating over the forward estimates. So there are a lot of problems for the Treasurer to work through. This is the first bill that we're discussing today with me in this new role, but I'll certainly be holding him to account for every decision that he's making sure that it's in the best interest of Tasmania, that he's not kicking the can down the road for political expediency, and that he does his job.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Clark, Mr Bailey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I rise to make a contribution for the Greens on the passage of the appropriation, further supplementary appropriation for 23-24 bill of 2024, and make the note at the outset that budgets in every form contain political choices and political priorities. They obviously put the dollar value on the commitments of the government and the things that they see as the most valuable to deliver. And of course, while we may disagree on many of those priorities, we certainly will not be obstructing the passage of this bill, and I want to compliment the departmental and Treasury staff who have pulled it together. It's obviously critical to keep the services of government going in the interim until we get to September, when we do have the full budget. But I do want to make a few comments and put them on the record on behalf of the Greens, because there are certainly some things in here that do need to be highlighted. They do need to be pulled out of this budget and some attention given to them. First, in that vein, I want to talk about the so-called supercharged renewable energy dividend. I mean, what rhetoric and spin that is, I agree, Mr Willie. I'd like to make the point that it is inappropriate to use this kind of hyperbole in a fact sheet for a bill. We're talking about the expenditure of $74 million from the public account. So let's not use silly marketing terminology, spin or rhetoric like that in any of the supporting material, because it certainly does no honour to the document. To spell it out for members and anyone who's reading or listening, this is a credit issued to the energy accounts of households and small businesses of $250 and $300 respectively. So look, it's not a dividend. It's got no particular relationship to renewable energy itself, and while it's a somewhat objective term, it's hard to make the case that it's supercharged in any kind of way. So let's call a spade, please, and when it comes to the serious matters of legislation and expenditure from the public account, let's just be straight down the line with how we describe these things and not necessarily drag into it all of the election rhetoric and spin. The Greens' position on this so-called dividend is that it's a poorly targeted mechanism to address the cost of living. It was clearly a cynical vote election promise contrived in an attempt to buy votes during the last election. Now, I want to be 100% clear. We need action on energy bills, and we also need action on the cost of living. But we need to have action that's targeted at the right people, and that is value for money. The issue at hand here is that a more targeted policy could have delivered twice the benefit to those who need it at more than half the cost. If the government was serious about cost of living relief for energy bills, they'd be expanding concession programs and investing in energy efficiency for public housing, low-income households. You know, that's where we can deliver genuine cost of living reform for Tasmanian people, and particularly the Tasmanian people that need it most. You know, there are people, including probably most of us in this House, who, let's face it, frankly, you know, on a salary of $140,000 plus, we don't need this kind of support in order to pay our household bills. We don't need it. There are people that could do with my share and therefore double this level of contribution to their relief. What we're seeing from this government are one-off post-election commitments. Their plan for energy bill credit payments and a halving of the cost of public transport are short-term, half-baked measures. Madam Deputy Speaker, the $74 million spent is a lot of money being spent on a paltry $250 or $300 credits. Like I say, it will make a difference to some people, but many don't need it, and we could make a bigger difference to the people that really do need it. For this sum, the government could make public schools, TASTAFE and public transport all free statewide for a year with about $20 million spare. So this is an extremely inefficient use of public funds from the party of self-proclaimed sensible economic and fiscal managers. When it comes to the drought funding that the Treasurer mentioned in the second reading, I just want to make a couple of points as well. I certainly, and the Greens are certainly in favour of drought funding. As the son of a farmer and someone who still spends a fair bit of time on the land, I do concur it's incredibly tough out there. We've had nearly no rain and virtually no rain in the autumn break, and it's getting to the point now where it's almost too cold for growth anyway. Let's hope that rain comes, but it will not necessarily deliver immediate relief for farmers. So I want to make clear we do support these kind of payments for farmers, but I just want to highlight what I guess I observed as incredibly cynical politicking during the election campaign, where drought and drought relief was effectively used as a political tool. The Premier flew to King Island, I think it was, first to announce drought relief. Flinders Island had to wait a couple of weeks until he could get a flight a couple of weeks later, and then he announced drought relief for Flinders Island, and I think it was a week or so later before he declared it for the whole state. It was so clearly needed for the whole state on day one. A declaration so clearly could have been made for relief and to give some confidence to struggling farmers that are not only struggling with the prices they're getting for their products and the amount of rain that's coming out of the sky, but this is causing serious impacts on their mental and other health and their relationships. And to have this kind of funding politicised and staged in an election context based on the campaign plan that the Liberal Party had delivered, I think was truly cynical and really, really lamentable. So while we support these payments, I just wanted to make those points about how they were staged and how they were rolled out in an election context. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to talk about the government's grant funding commitments during the election campaign, some of which Mr Willie